Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're digging into a pretty incredible story. How does one monk, with basically nothing to his name, build a massive global Buddhist organization from the ground up? I mean, from nothing. Let's get into it. Okay, so this one sentence from the founder, Master Hsing Yun, it's really the key to the whole thing. And you know what's wild? It doesn't point to some big fancy headquarters. Nope, it points to a tiny typhoon-battered temple in this out-of-the-way town in Taiwan. That's where this whole global movement started. So this whole story really breaks down into three main parts. We start in that small town, then we'll see how the idea moved to the big city on the southern coast, and then, boom, it goes global. All right, let's dive into part one. Picture this. It's 1953. A young, totally unknown monk named Hsing Yun shows up in this really isolated place, Yilan. And what he finds is, well, a faith that's kind of fading away. It was mostly just something the elderly did, quietly in their own homes. So you can see the problem, right? It was a huge challenge. Nobody was really going to the temple. And forget about the young people. They were completely checked out. So the big question is, how on earth do you breathe life back into this? How do you make it feel new and exciting and, actually relevant? Well, he didn't just sit around waiting. He took the temple to the people. He put together these mobile teams, and they'd literally walk through the streets with drums and lanterns, and they'd call out this phrase in the local dialect. It was powerful and so welcoming. It was like saying, hey, this is for you too. It was a personal invitation, not some stuffy formal thing. And his whole strategy was really built on three big ideas. First, he got people to practice together. He moved worship out of private homes and into these public chanting groups, which created a real sense of community. Second, he went all in on the youth. He started choirs, student groups, speaking teams, things that made Buddhism feel dynamic and cool. And third, he focused on real-world help. He set up free tutoring classes to help local kids get ahead. The temple basically became the heart of the community. And get this. This is what really blows my mind. He paid for all of it himself. That 600 new Taiwan dollars, that was his entire monthly stipend, and he spent every single penny of it on the kids, buying them little gifts, paying for their school fees. It just shows you how much he was willing to invest, personally, in people. Okay, let's move on to the next chapter. Word starts to get around about what's happening in Yilan, right? And pretty soon, he gets an invitation to come south, to the big port city of Kaohsiung. And let me tell you, the vibe there was a whole different ballgame. This comparison really nails the strategic shift he had to make. Think about it. Yilan was like his quiet laboratory, right? It's where he tested and perfected his ideas. But Kaohsiung was the marketplace. It was full of these super enthusiastic people who were hungry for what he was offering. It had the energy, the fertile ground he needed to really scale things up. Big time. So here's where we hit a really crucial moment. His work with young people was so successful that it created a brand new, kind of good problem to have. All these kids were inspired and wanted to become monks and nuns, but he had nowhere to train them. No formal school, no dorms, nothing. His own success was literally bursting at the seams. And that need just kicked off this flurry of activity. First, he gets a permanent base in the south. Then, just a few years later, a whole new temple is built to house everybody. And then, the big one. In 1965, he founds the Choson Buddhist College. This wasn't just another building. This was the very first seed of what would grow into a worldwide education system. And of course, the college was a huge hit. I mean, so successful that they ran out of room almost immediately. This urgent need for more space, for a bigger campus to train all these new people, that's what directly led to buying this big, empty mountain and founding Foguang Shan in 1967. It was an organization that, from day one, was built around the idea of education. So those first 20 years were just a whirlwind of construction, really building the foundation. And what's so telling is that the very first building they put up wasn't the main shrine, it was the college. This period is also when they took their first steps internationally. But maybe the most shocking move was when Master Hsing Yun stepped down as abbot, right at the peak of his power, to create a modern system so that leadership could pass to the next generation. After that, things just exploded. The growth in the following decades was unbelievable. And it wasn't just about building more temples. It was about creating this whole ecosystem, a global organization that was active in culture, education, media, you name it. I mean, the scale is just hard to wrap your head around. Just think back to that one little struggling temple back in Yilan. From that single spot, there are now something like 300 Fo Guangshan centers all over the world. It's just wow. And this really shows you how that initial focus on education became the absolute backbone of the entire organization. We're talking a massive global network, everything from Buddhist colleges training new leaders to full-on public universities on 5 different continents. That original goal of nurturing talent? They're still doing it, just on a massive scale. So you gotta ask, what's the big idea behind all of this? What's the engine that drove this thing from one tiny town to a global phenomenon? Well, it all comes down to this really beautiful and powerful old metaphor. It's called the endless lamp, and it's really the core of their philosophy. The idea is simple but profound. One lamp can light 1,000 other lamps, and its own flame doesn't get any smaller. So the point isn't to hoard the light for yourself. The point is to share it, to pass it on, spreading that wisdom and compassion from person to person, forever. So when you look at the whole picture, it's clear the success of Fo Guangshan was no accident. It was the direct result of taking these core principles and applying them on a global scale. And where did those principles come from? They were all born and tested in that little laboratory of his, way back in Yilan. And that really leaves us with this final thought, doesn't it? The story of Fo Guangshan kind of forces us to ask, what does it really take to turn a single tiny spark into a light that shines across the entire globe? And I think the answer it gives us is that with a clear vision, the courage to try new things, and just an absolute focus on empowering people, one small lamp really can light up the world.